Say rebels are close to seizing an air base in the country's north. Anti-government forces have increasingly been taking aim at military bases and airports in an attempt to stop bombardments. Today alone, at least 75 people were killed in airstrikes. Syrian warplanes have intensified their airstrikes across the country as President Bashar al-Assad's power continues to slip. Activist videos uploaded to the internet show attacks on Douma. The U.S. estimates at least 60,000 people have been killed since the uprising began. And for more on the ongoing conflict, we go to Clifford May, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. So, Clifford, who has the upper hand militarily right now?
You know, it's become less clear rather than more clear over the last few days because on the one hand, you've seen the rebels take airports and take other important strategic positions, but the Syrian military under Bashar has also been on the offensive in a number of different places, and we have to see no weakening in his position, no concessions being made on any side. And so it looks more like they're trading territory and that there are places where the Syrian army is prevailing and places where the Syrian army is falling back to the rebels. The rebels are complaining that they don't have enough ammunition at this point, don't have enough weapons. They're not getting them as they were at one point. And the Syrian military, despite the defections, seems loyal and does appear to have the bullets to fire.
But what's the significance of going after air bases and airports?
Well, air bases and airports are important strategic targets. For one thing, you want to prevent planes from taking off and being used by the military against the rebel positions, as they have been for a long time. That's why you had rebels long ago calling for a no-fly zone so that the aircraft could not be used against them. For another thing, by closing down the airports, even for passenger traffic, civilian traffic, you do damage to the Syrian economy, and you make it clear that Syria is in the midst of this civil war, and it's not a normal place, and people can't come in, weapons can't come in, supplies can't get in as easily from Iran and other places that have been supplying the Bashar al-Assad regime. And so it's very strategic to have airports, to have radio stations, TV stations,
right,
and to have government facilities. Those are important targets to take.
And what does this uptick in violence mean to you? I mean, is it a sign of the end or just another chapter in this very long conflict?
It's very hard to say. Yes, it could be an explosion, a conflagration just before the end, but we don't know that. There's no real way that you can predict that. We haven't seen any response to any of the diplomatic initiatives that are underway. The UN has been trying to do some things. They've been talking to the Russians, seeing if they could get the Russians to put more pressure on Assad to step down or to negotiate or to make concessions or to agree with something. We've seen no movement whatsoever anywhere here. And so at the moment what we're seeing is, as I said, the Syrian army in some places redoubling its efforts and in some places being pushed back by the rebel forces, but I can't say that there is a trend that is clear that we can see. And by the way, most of our information is still pretty sketchy. You get bits of film out of there and you get reports from dissidents. But if you look in the major newspapers, all the reports on Syria are out of Beirut because it's so dangerous to be there right now. You've got an Agence France photographer who has been taken hostage. We're not even sure by whom. Very hard to get a real good, clear picture of the overall situation.
And speaking of trying to get a clear picture, I mean, for the longest time we were saying the death toll, and it was 20,000, 30,000. The latest I remember was saying 40,000, but the UN put the death toll this week at 60,000, and the Arab League, I understand, says another 100,000 could die this year, 2013 alone. So what impact do these numbers really have? I mean, we were talking about what's going on in Syria, but what about what's going on outside of Syria? Knowing that it's 20,000 more than we thought, is that going to get the international community to rally or not at all?
Well, these are stunning figures, and I think in this case the UN figures seem to me, based on the methodology, seem to me to be credible, so we could have 60,000. The Arab League in predicting, I don't take that as seriously, although I think the Arab League is doing very little to help the situation, and I think they deserve criticism for that. No, I don't think it does very much except shock us.
Right.
It's a terrible humanitarian situation, and yet there are no diplomatic initiatives that look promising at the moment. The UN is totally inept and impotent. Same with the Arab League. The U.S. has sort of delegated or outsourced the problem to Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, who have been supplying weapons to a lot of groups that I don't think we would like to have weapons. On the other hand, the opposition is going to take help from any place they can get it at this point, and I'm not sure we can entirely blame them for that.
And so what's preferable here, a rebel victory or a negotiated settlement?
Well, it depends on your perspective. From a humanitarian perspective, if you could get a negotiated settlement of some kind that would stop the killing, obviously that would be preferable. If you're in the opposition and you think the Assad regime absolutely has to go, and there's no way that you can deal with him even on a reduced basis, then you're going to probably fight on, and that seems to be what the opposition wants to do as well. You do not get an agreement unless both sides unless both sides are willing to move, or unless one side sees that it's about to be defeated. We don't have those conditions at this moment. I've said for a long time, I'd like to see those groups that are more secular, more liberal, more in line with the West, I'd like to see them assisted. It's not easy to identify them and supply them. It's not impossible to do. Those who are doing the shooting now are likely to be calling the shots later. I think it would be okay to have various groups within Syria have a lot of autonomy in a post-Assad era. That includes the Alawites, his own people. I don't want to see them wiped out in a wave of sectarian violence either. I don't want to see any genocides in Syria, and I don't think anybody in the West does. So is there a basis for negotiations? Yes. Mm-hmm. Is there a willingness for negotiations among the parties? We do not see that yet.
Clifford, it's so sad that this story keeps on going, but we appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. Clifford May, with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington.